Now guys, I know there's some of you watching this who'll be a bit concerned about Magnus's health after seeing that clip, but we have had reports, I can't even do this with a straight face. So we've got Hikaru, we've got Magnus, and it's the final that we all wanted to see. Now it's the first kind of mini final, then there's going to be a grand final. I'm not going to go into all the format details, but this one here was key because it sets up one person to be in the prime position to win the whole thing. Now after 4 games, they could not be split. 4 draws. So it went to, yes, an Armageddon. Now, the players have to bid. The player who has the least time after the bid then gets to choose colours, and very often they want black because they get the draw odds. If they draw, they still win the whole match. Now, Hikaru, he bid 8 minutes 59 seconds. Carlsen, he bids, as you can see on screen, 8 minutes 58 seconds. So 1-0 Carlsen in terms of the psychological battle there. So Hikaru's got white. He's in a must-win situation. And we see one hell of a choke in this game. So let's check it out. We get knight f3 on the board. Knight f6, g3, and after c5 we're going to see these players go down some standard King's Indian attack moves, but what you'll see is that Carlsen is actually the one who sets up this big centre. Normally you see white doing this, and it's Naka now playing this kind of closed structure, striking at the centre from afar, which he now does with e4. Now it looks like you're shedding a pawn, but actually after captures, if these queens then come off and black takes, well, this is how white wins the pawn back, because you open up this bishop here. So after the knight's recaptured, you then take this one. White's doing well, restored the material balance. Just to show you that one in case you don't know. So here we see the pawn kick on. Carlsen takes the space. a4 now from Naka, so a classic idea. You secure the c4 square for your knight to bounce round to. Bishop e7 develops, knight a3. Bishop e6 now covers that square somewhat, and so Naka jumps his knight in, attacks the bishop. It moves into g4, hits the queen. That one's blocked, and now the bishop drops back onto this diagonal, and it looks like it's getting a bit boxed in, but we'll see how we get a breakout. Knight c4 now, and knight d7 begins that process of remanoeuvring the bishop. So first off, it opens this queen and bishop battery. The knight has to drop back, and now we get f6. So not only supporting the centre, but the bishop can move back, as we see. Knight f2 now from Hikaru, and castles. Now this is not a beautiful knight, and here Magnus is already a little bit better. You know, he's got slightly more space in the centre. He's got all 4 minor pieces developed. This one's still on the back rank. This one's looking kind of ugly. And when you look at the journey that's gone on, f3, g5, h3, f2, not a great piece. But I say all this because it's the kind of position that Nakamura wants. It's kind of double-edged. Yes, black's a bit better, but he's got all sorts of pawn breaks in the air. Who knows how the game could develop? It's what you need when you have to win. So now h4 was played. And after bishop f7, we see one of the points, which is to bring the bishop to h3, but you've already gained some space. Now knight b6, so it challenges this one. b3 supports, we see the knight chopped off, and after pawn recaptures, well, you give something, you gain something. So you've given white this open b file. They could attack this pawn later, but in return, you've chopped off this dominant knight, and this pawn could be weak later in the game. Bishop d6 from Carlsen, so he's looking at this f4 break, preempting it. Nakamura now plays it, and here Carlsen takes, and there's nothing so wrong with this in itself, but now he goes wrong by playing queen c7. Not the best move because it allows Hikaru to play a very thematic pawn sacrifice. Can you guess the move that he could have played in this position but missed? So I've maybe given away the game there when I said pawn sack, because there's only one pawn sack on the board. But it's to push that one on, and after captures, go f5. Really nice positional idea. You clear the e4 square, land the knight, and although you've given the pawn, this one kind of looks like a big pawn, and all the pieces can now just stream out into the game. The king can move, the rooks can double. It's just the kind of attack that plays itself. Very nice positional chess. But it was missed. Knight to h1 played instead, and after king h8 the move's lost all its power because the knight can't hop into e4 anymore, so knight g3 played, and it's coming for the f5 square, so Carlsen covers. He doesn't want it landing there. queen f3 activates. This rook comes to the centre. The king sidesteps, looking to bring a rook there one day. And now Magnus challenges this bishop. We see them exchanged off. Rook recaptures, and here Hikaru finally develops his last minor piece and connects his rooks. And this is where Carlsen now seeks to clarify the pawn structure by kicking on to f5. And Hikaru makes the wrong positional choice here. And you can see by the way now they're almost back to neck and neck on the clock, so he's even kind of lost his time advantage. Now, Hikaru kicks on, but actually his best was the immediate pawn h5. For the reason being that if black takes here, now you can take with the knight, and because there's no pawn here covering the square, well, you've activated this knight quite nicely. But after the pawn kicks on, well, although it looks nice, gaining that space, you've got a passed pawn, you kick back the bishop. One of the problems is now the knight can never activate to e4, and also you've opened this diagonal towards the king, but you can't blockade on the e4 square. So now when h5 comes, things do get a bit more dangerous for the white king than the black king, because Magnus now takes. It's a double-edged move, but he's saying, I've got pawn cover, you haven't. And after rook g1 from Hikaru, not rushing to recapture this one, we see rook g6, and Hikaru now makes a blunder in this position. So he should take this pawn with the knight. But instead, what he does is go with the queen. And now here Magnus had a brilliant move which he missed, neither of them playing their best stuff on the day. So he saw the kind of idea but didn't execute it right. Can you find the move that should have been played and wins on the spot for black? So the move to play is knight takes on e5. Now what's the big idea? Well, if you capture that knight, then you land this check here on c6, and actually it's really hard to deal with because you can't step off the h file with the king. So say you step up to h2 here, well then there's this skewer coming against king and queen. Now I know the bishop covers, so that's why f4 comes first. You're hitting the knight, you're blocking the bishop, you're threatening this, and so the best move for white is actually this one, but the whole thing is now collapsing. You've regained your piece and the threats are still coming, huge advantage to black. So that would have ended the game on the spot, but Magnus missed it. He went knight to b4, similar idea, and hits this pawn, but not as strong, because Hikaru can now go queen to f3, he spots it, he comes onto that diagonal. Now yes, Magnus can win a pawn, but it's not as clear cut, even though he's better. The rook comes to b1, converging on the b7 pawn, and now the knight hops back, and rook g2 from Hikaru, so at least preparing to give that king some room, maybe bring the rook here one day. Queen c6, so the queens are getting forced off the board. Hikaru captures, and now Magnus takes with the pawn. Certainly not a bad move, it is covered by this rook. And if you ever take here to deal with the pressure on d3, well this endgame is just so good for black. Past b pawn, protected by the bishop. So we didn't see that played. Instead Hikaru, he seeks counterplay. Now this pawn was not defended. If you go rook b3, the problem is the g file. You can attack this knight and it can't move, or you lose the rook. Plus there's bishop h4 coming to put more pressure on. That's just really bad because of all the pins. So knight e2 comes away from that trouble, sheds this pawn, but at least now rook b7 comes, activates, hits this bishop. So Magnus covers. Now the knight comes to c1, gets that deadly piece off the board. Here Magnus trades, the bishop recaptures, and a6 now protects the attacked pawn. We see rook b6 going after it again, and so it advances one more square, but bishop d2 hits it, and as Magnus cannot save that pawn, not in a proper way, you don't want to go really passive with the rook, that's why he goes for counterplay now with pawn to d3. And here we get just some absolute comedy gold. So after rook takes on g6, pawn recaptures with the idea that you can now bring your king. Here we see black bringing the king, and David Howell just comes out with this 30 seconds of absolute classic commentary. So listen to this.
Guys, we've got to mention, the whole day Magnus's air quality has been great, but as the pressure has increased, his air quality has got worse and worse and worse, and that might be affecting his play. And look at that, suddenly no green circles there for him. If he goes down to defeat, maybe that would have been one of the reasons. Magnus, he's just playing too slowly right now. If he had better air quality, maybe he would be a bit faster, and every second counts at this level. The margins are so small.
Now guys, I know there's some of you watching this who'll be a bit concerned about Magnus's health after seeing that clip, but we have had reports, I can't even do this with a straight face, we have had some reports come through that the chess bras have managed to open a window. So Eric and Aman have actually addressed the air quality situation with Magnus, and we're hoping that his health will improve soon. So for any concerned citizens out there, please be reassured. So that clip just absolutely cracked me up the first time I saw it. I mean, you can really see the influence of the sponsors on these events and the commentary. So Magnus is 2 pawns up, the SMOG Gambit from Hikaru, but can he hold his nerve here? Can he not choke and lose the game? Well, let's see. So we see the rook capture on c6, 1 pawn back, rook to d8 from Magnus. Can he breathe? Can he hold his nerve? Now king f3 comes across, rook d4 invades, and we see this trade of pawns now, a pawn for c pawn, but this is good for Magnus because after this bishop goes, the pawn now comes and this is 2 connected passes, so dangerous. Hikaru comes here, hits this bishop, king f8 played, and after a5, rook a2 coming behind, we now see a6 and c3. These pawns so menacing, things are coming to an absolute climax. But before we do, is this you toiling away, trying to improve your chess? If so, you need Aimchess in your life. They'll take your recent game data from Lichess, chess.com, bring in personalized lessons and skyrocket your rating. Use the link down below, try it for free, and code EPIC at checkout will get you discount if you do want a premium plan. So check it out, nothing to lose, highly recommend it. Back to this game here. So after pawn to c3, we see rook d7 from Hikaru coming behind, and now Magnus misses a tactic which is just child's play at his level. So he could go pawn to d2 here, and if white advances, well, you can actually just capture that pawn, because if the rook goes, well, you make a queen here, and if the bishop goes, well, now you go pawn c2, and again, one of these is going through. That's completely decisive. So I'm surprised Magnus did not do this. Instead, he took the pawn. Now what he's seen is that after captures rook c6, this is still hopeless for white to ever win. You're a pawn up with black and it's down here, but still surprising how he executed on this one. Now bishop c1, king f7, rook d7, pawn c2, and these were now the final moves of the game. Magnus just shepherding it towards the draw, liquidating over here because after captures, he wins this one back. And yes, you're giving a whole bishop, but then you're promoting here. Now this is one funny moment. We get this check. I mean, can you imagine if the king was on d4 here? This would actually be checkmate. But okay, it's not. It can come to d5, only square. And now the bishop has to take back the queen. The rook takes, king f3 and rook c4. Final move of the game. Here Hikaru actually offered a draw. I'd love to have seen him try and dirty flag. I mean, nothing to lose, right? He had to try and win the game. Draw's no good for him. But okay, he offered it very gentlemanly. And that meant that Magnus Carlsen won this match. He goes to the grand final and he'll be facing, okay, someone. Could be Hikaru, could be Wesley So, maybe Arjun's the other one, I forget. And that will be coming on Friday evening this week in February. Thanks very much for watching, and if you want to see another exceptional Magnus Carlsen game, then check out the video on screen. See you soon.